Rocky 4, aka the best one. Is it technically? No, but is it really? Hell yeah. If Rocky 3 just dipped its toes into 80s cheese, Rocky 4 belly flops into it with no worries whatsoever, and it is all the better for it. In many ways, I may have more of a personal connection to this movie than I even do the first Rocky movie, because technically speaking, embarrassing as it may be for me to admit this was the first Rocky movie that I've seen. In the 80s, my dad was in the military. He was in the Navy. And whenever he was on shore leave, he usually went to the movies. And there were only two movies in the 80s that he went to see multiple times in the theater. Back to School, which I absolutely love, and Rocky 4. If the first Rocky is engraved in my cultural history, Rocky 4 is engraved in my familial history. Like I said in my review of Rocky 3, one of my favorite parts about the 80s era of the Rocky franchise is the relationship between Rocky and Apollo. And even though, yeah, I liked the relationship that they had in the third movie, the relationship that they have in the fourth movie is incredible. Everything shown in this movie related to Rocky and Apollo, whether it's the last flashbacks to the end of the third movie that they show at the beginning of this film, or the little tidbits that they have of their interactions before Apollo fights Ivan Drago, it just goes to show the respect that these characters have for one another, the love for these characters, and especially the chemistry between these two actors. If there's one thing that I can honestly say never devolved in time throughout the Rocky franchise, it's the acting when it comes to the main cast. When Apollo is trying to convince Rocky that he should take the fight against Ivan Drago, and that whole speech about where does the fighter go, where does the warrior go once the war is over, it's actually really powerful stuff, and you can tell that Carl Weathers believes every single word that is coming out of his mouth. It's really powerful stuff, and you really do buy that Apollo and Rocky have this long respected relationship. To the point where once Apollo fights Drago and Apollo eventually dies in the ring, it's a bulldozer of a moment. I mean, you expect Apollo to lose, but to be killed in the ring? That amount of drama just circulating throughout the second third of this movie, and the culmination of that being the reason why Rocky eventually takes the fight to fight Ivan Drago. There is so much drama there that in many ways I respect more than even Mickey's death in the third movie, because yeah, I think technically that is a sadder moment because we've had 3 movies to really get to know Mickey as a character, as a good supporting character to the main character. But when it comes to Apollo, he was only the supporting character in the previous film, whereas in Rocky 1 and 2, he was the villain, and to kill him in the ring after we've had only a movie to build the friendship between Apollo and Rocky was a risky move in terms of the writing, but the chemistry between the two actors completely sells it and makes you feel the loss. And speaking of the previous film, one of my biggest flaws with Rocky 3 was that we never got to know a whole lot of the relationships in that movie. We never got to see a whole lot of Rocky and Adrian or Rocky and his son. We never got to fully grasp a whole lot of the relationships with the exception of maybe Apollo and definitely Mickey. But in this movie, it definitely feels like Sylvester Stallone learned from those criticisms and incorporated a whole lot of familial elements into this film. There are a lot of really good heartfelt moments where Rocky interacts with Adrian, with his son, with Paulie, with Apollo, with every single character that is by his side, and it really does make you feel like, yeah, Rocky isn't just fighting for himself, he's fighting for literally everyone he knows. To the point where when Adrian is trying to convince Rocky not to take the fight and eventually just screams at him he can't win, it hurts you because you've never heard Adrian say something like that. But yeah, those are all the dramatic moments. The silly moments in this movie, even though they're technically stupid, God, I love it. Let's start with Ivan Drago, who is amazing. The way that Dolph Lundgren towers over every single person on screen, his almost always blank expressions, his few lines of dialogue. Ivan Drago is probably the most cartoonish villain in the entire Rocky series, And I absolutely love it. And I think that's why I like Ivan Drago more than Clubber Lang, because Clubber Lang was so much bark, and yeah, he had a lot of bite to him, but he just let that bark carry him throughout the entire runtime. Here, Ivan Drago is just a statue. He just stands there, letting everyone make fun of him, letting everyone threaten him, waiting till he's in the ring, and then he just lets loose. Like right before he fights Rocky, and he's just looking down on him and just says, "I must break you." Or when Apollo's just making fun of him before their fight, and he goes to pound down on Ivan's fists, and it just stops right then and there, and then Ivan Drago just says, "You will lose." It is awesome. And let's get to the editing in the movie, because at the same time, yeah, for the most part, it is extremely bad editing. But at the same time, a good half of it is bad, and the other half of it is really fun. The bad stuff kind of relates to how the editing relates to the overall pacing, because yeah, that does make the movie feel extremely rushed. We go from the end of the last movie to Drago's introduction, to his fight with Apollo, to Apollo's death, to Rocky's fight with Drago in the mere span of what feels like minutes. And yeah, there are a couple scenes of interactions and build-up sprinkled between those moments, but overall, those feel like cliff notes as opposed to what most people are here to see, and that is the fights. And while on some level I'm okay with that, a bit more would have helped, especially seeing a bit more interaction between Apollo and his family. But on the other hand, who cares? Because once we get past the legitimately bad editing of the first half, the last half is just montage, montage, montage. This movie might as well have just been called Rocky IV, Montage the Movie, for just how many montages there are in this thing. You've got the morning montage, where Rocky's driving and thinking about the previous films, where they were obviously planning this to be the last movie. You've got the arrival to Russia montage, where you can practically feel the bitter coldness of both the weather and the Soviet Union. You've got the training montage, two of them, count them, two of them showing the progress of both Rocky and Drago. And of course, you've got the going the distance montage, where Rocky and Drago are just wailing on each other. It's all rushed, it's all sloppy, but God, does it get you pumped! Especially when it comes to the music during these montages, because God, the soundtrack in this movie is just incredible. For one, you still got Eye of the Tiger playing in the beginning of the movie when they're recapping the previous film, but along with that, you have a whole bunch of other cheesy 80s music that's amazing. You got Burning Heart, you got No Easy Way Out, and of course, you've got Hearts on Fire, which is by far the best anthem since Eye of the Tiger, and it's right up there with Eye of the Tiger, like, oh my God. And during the fight between Drago and Rocky, when they're just wailing at each other throughout the 15 rounds, and eventually when they're fighting in the Soviet Union, the entire stadium just switches sides and it goes from chanting Drago, Drago, Drago to Rocky, Rocky, Rocky. It makes no sense. Why did they change? You know why? Because the Rocky spirit now lives. Who cares if it makes no sense? It's amazing! And finally, when the 15 rounds is done and over with, and Rocky has officially knocked out Ivan and Drago, and the crowd is just cheering his name, and after all the celebrations, does it stop there? No, because Rocky has to end the Cold War with one speech. And if I can change, and you can change, everybody can change! This is the best 80s ending since they accidentally started World War III at the end of Top Gun. Is this movie stupid as hell? You bet your ass. The pacing is so unbelievably rushed, the editing is awful, there are way too many montages, and there are just so many stupid, unnatural, inconsistent moments that completely defy logic itself. But I don't care. The acting is so good, the chemistry between the characters is always felt, the music is awesome, the energy is so full of itself, it's damn near impossible not to get wrapped up in the drama of it all. This is why I sometimes hate grading movies, because on an objective level, this is definitely one of the lesser Rocky movies, but on a personal level, this is by far the most entertaining Rocky movie. I'm going to give Rocky IV a B+. I don't regret it. I don't regret it. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments down below, what is your favorite 80s ridiculous movie? It doesn't necessarily have to be a guilty pleasure, it just has to be a movie from the 80s that you just enjoy watching time and time again. For me, hands down, it's definitely this movie, but to be fair, Top Gun and The Lost Boys are definitely up there. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are the best. And don't forget to click subscribe and click the bell icon down below to stay up to date for all things movie, all things TV, all things nerd. I have to watch Rocky V now.